Hi, this is John Lineval from John Lineval Tutoring, and this is AP US History Video 38, Economic and Social Change in the Antebellum Era. If you like this video, please hit the like button and please share and please subscribe. Also, you can check out my website at testpreparation.locals.com. So, new developments in commerce, agriculture, and transportation. The antebellum, which literally means before the war, ante means before, bellum means war, in U.S. history discussions means before the Civil War. So, the antebellum period saw massive economic and social change in the United States. New technology altered the economy as these changes made it possible for U.S. goods to be shipped between states, regions, and nations. New methods of production, distribution, and consumption of commodities changed manufacturing and agricultural production in the U.S. dramatically and permanently. The market revolution. The rapid growth of the market economy, often called the market revolution, integrated local economies with regional, national, and international economies through trade, etc. Banking and credit became crucial parts of trade, especially after the Panic of 1819, which showed the new market economy could be unstable. However, the rapid recovery after the Panic of 1819 showed how important the market economy was in fueling economic development. The Second Bank of the United States extended credit to businesses, which made the economy run, which is similar to how business works today. Banks lend businesses money all the time. State banks also tendered credit to businesses, and all banks extended credit in the form of banknotes. Banknotes were no perfect solution to credit needs since their value varied from state to state, but they were the first paper currency. Paper money, just like any money, is really only worth what people believe it is, but as long as people generally have an idea of what these notes are worth, you can use paper banknotes as money. Now, President Andrew Jackson's insistence on specie, that is, gold and silver payment for payments to the government, caused problems in the 1830s. Remember, you can see video 35 and take a look at the specie circular part. Corporate America begins. In the 1700s and 1800s, corporate status was granted to groups of individuals, generally for limited purposes. For example, the development of roads, canals, and other internal improvements or projects the government wanted them to create. By the 1830s and 1840s, states had passed laws allowing corporations which the general public could buy an interest, that is, shares of stock, and for which the investors, that is, the stockholders or shareholders, had limited liability, limited only to the amount the stockholders had actually invested. They couldn't be sued or otherwise held legally liable for more money. So, let's say a corporation fails miserably and owes 100 millions or hundreds of millions, whatever. Let's say it owes $100 million on contracts it couldn't honor, but there are only 100 shareholders, and each shareholder's stake is $100. Each shareholder is out the $100 investment that they put in, but the shareholder does not have to pay what some would call his or her, or non-binary pronouns, $1 million share of the debt. If you split the $100 million over 100 shareholders and say, okay, you all owe you all owe $1 million, I should say, So, there are some exceptions to this rule, but they're rare, and we'll talk about that in a second. Piercing the corporate veil, for example. The same applies to limited liability companies, etc. So, under California case law, you can read this, I'm just going to summarize it. Basically, if you're operating it in such a way that it looks like the owner and the corporation are really the same thing, they always have the same interest, and also that, okay, there really is no separation between the corporation and the person who owns it, or a small group of people who owns it, so that the separateness has ceased and adherence to the fiction of separate existence would sanction a fraud or promote injustice. In other words, if they're just using it as a shield for liability, but they're not really treating it like a separate entity that exists. So, they're going to look at, basically, did you mix the money together? Are you treating the corporate assets basically as your own assets? Are you not maintaining records? Are you not maintaining very good records? Undercapitalization. So basically, if you're not putting any money into your corporation, but you're taking it all out so the corporation doesn't have anything. And in that case, you'd probably also find that the entity is being used as a shell for the individual. That's a separate factor, but still you could say, well, okay, if there's no money in here, maybe he just has a corporation because he doesn't want to get sued, or she doesn't want to get sued, or non-binary doesn't want to get sued, or doesn't want to lose any money anyway. So, if there are a few shareholders and these people are using it as their piggy bank, they're not keeping enough money in corporate accounts to cover liability or normal costs or whatever, insurance costs, things like that, then they're probably just using the corporate form to avoid liability for the things that they do. And disclaimer, I'm not your lawyer. This is not legal advice. If you have a problem with a corporation, something like this, please go see a real live corporate law attorney if you need advice about this matter. So, as we said, if there's few shareholders using corporate assets as their piggy bank, etc., that's kind of the exception. Basically, normally corporations do just limit liability. And I would like to note that even if an individual just incorporates himself or herself, that's not necessarily an indicator that there is fraud. So, for example, if you are running a business for yourself like Joe Rogan does here, Joe Rogan is, of course, a commentator for the UFC, the Ultimate Fighting, whatever they call, I'm not sure what the C stands for. Anyway, Ultimate Fighting, and he also does his own podcast, The Joe Rogan Experience, and he's a stand-up comedian. All of those things are entertainment industry things where a lot of the time you're just an independent contractor. So he is well within his rights, and it's a good idea for him to just establish himself as a corporation and keep good records and then run everything like a corporation and pay himself minimum wage, etc., things like that. So he's incorporated. No big deal, but if you're going to incorporate yourself as a person, want to take care of everything and make sure it's all above board. Again, I'm not your attorney. If you have a problem with some sort of corporate thing or any kind of legal thing, please talk to a real live lawyer in your jurisdiction. So, in any event, large corporations usually keep very good records. Don't let shareholders use corporate property or assets as their own personal property. Don't commingle corporate money with individual shareholders' money or with corporate officers' money. So that's generally going to set up the corporation as a separate entity. You can say, no, all these monies belong to the corporation. All these cars, all these, whatever, the corporation's offices are rented or were bought by the corporation. So you can say that's very different from the CEO's house, which is basically paid for with the CEO's salary, etc. So if the corporation fails, the corporation may go bankrupt, may dissolve, but the shareholders are generally fine unless they invested way too much in the corporation, then they could be in trouble. Anyway, generally that's not going to happen, so with the threat of unlimited personal liability removed, investors felt much freer to invest in various corporations to promote business. Supreme support for the market economy. The U.S. Supreme Court decisions in the first half of the 1800s generally supported the market economy, mostly regarding contracts. For example, there's a case of Trustees of Dartmouth College versus Woodward. That's where the famous Dartmouth College's Royal Colonial Charter was ruled as a contract to which New Hampshire was a party and which could not be rescinded or modified unilaterally, that is, by one party alone. Unilaterally means literally one side. So New Hampshire wanted Dartmouth to become a state college, but the Supreme Court said, no, you're the successor in interest to this contract that was originally between the Crown, the British King or Queen or whoever was in charge at the time it was founded, and Dartmouth College, so you stepped in, but you don't get to modify it. Not surprisingly, given the case of Fletcher v. Peck, the Congress held up the case in Dartmouth College versus Woodward because Fletcher v. Peck dealt with a land deal between Georgia and individuals, and even though the court found that it was a corrupt land deal, it was still upheld as a contract, even though it wasn't in the Georgia citizens' best interest. I guess the Georgia citizens would have to just find some relief by voting these officials out of office or taking some other legal action because they weren't just going to be able to undo the land deal. So, technological advances. Advances in agricultural, manufacturing, and communications technology caused great economic advancement in the Antebellum era. For example, the steam engine, the telegraph, interchangeable parts, better agricultural tools, and textile machinery were all developed in the first half of the 19th century. The agriculture became more efficient during that same time period. So several new inventions increased the efficiency of farm work in the first half of the 1800s. These were improved hand tools and animal-powered farm machinery like horse-driven plows. The steel plow developed by John Deere was better than the cast iron plow that was used before. Hay rakes, mowers, grain drills, and harrows were all improved. There were two important inventions, such as the automatic mower, invented by Cyrus McCormick in 1831, which cut and stacked grain such as wheat, and the thresher, which separated wheat from inedible chaff, so that's the stalk of the wheat that you can't really eat, much faster than previous methods. Both worked much faster than previous methods. Anyway, so they were used on farms in the Old Northwest, which is the land bounded by the Great Lakes, the Ohio, and the Mississippi rivers. Interchangeable parts. Okay, so we see Eli Whitney's improved firearms. Eli Whitney, the inventor of the cotton gin, popularized the idea of interchangeable parts, although others had thought of and used the idea. By the 1850s, this idea had spread from textile production to many manufacturing sectors. Interchangeable parts were made to strict specifications, so they could all be used in different machines of the same type because they were all basically the same, making manufacturing much faster and more efficient. So imagine if you didn't have interchangeable parts today. If you had a Chrysler 300 or any kind of car, and you learned that, oh, the parts on your car can only be used on literally your car. You can't use them in other Chrysler 300s. You can't get other Chrysler 300s parts and use them to fix your car or replace parts on your car. That would be a huge pain because then you would need custom-made replacement parts that would be really expensive and hard to get. So definitely interchangeable parts have made manufacturing much easier. Steam power engines. Steam power was a major development of the first half of the 1800s. British industry developed high-pressure steamship and locomotive engines. Robert Fulton developed a steamship to Clermont that was demonstrated on the Hudson River in 1807. He was an American, so it makes sense that it would be tested on an American river, in this case in New York State. Within 20 years, commercial shipping was mostly by steamboat all over the rivers and lakes of the United States. Steam locomotives drove trains. Steam turbines drove factories, replacing the water wheels, which were early 1800s technology, that made things turn and go in factories. Communication advances. The telegraph, developed by Samuel Morse, thus Morse code, the language used by telegraphs, was named after him, patented the telegraph in 1844. The first message was, "What hath God wrought?" Morse code was long and short pulses, dashes, and dots. The first telegraph line was from Washington, D.C. to Baltimore, Maryland. Telegraph lines were quickly run, generally along railroad lines. Long-distance communication allowed for long-distance purchasing, leading to much larger markets and faster production, etc. So, for example, Massachusetts textile mills could order cotton in a few minutes from plantations in the South, as opposed to the few days a letter might take. Transportation improves, increasing regional interdependence. Steamboats and locomotives, as well as roads, enabled long-distance trade. Regions could specialize in different products such as southern cotton, northeastern textiles, western grain, So basically these things could be shipped to make products. So textiles could be made from cotton after being shipped from the south to the northeast. Flour could be made from grain, being shipped from the west to wherever the flour is going to be made. Or these things could be directly sold to consumers. And northeastern textiles could be sent wherever the cloth was needed to make clothing. Canals and roads, 1800 to 1830s. Roads and canals improved, and their expansion/improvement was called internal improvements. The Erie Canal, also known as Clinton's Ditch, was that's what critics called it because they figured, it's never going to get done. It's just going to be a huge boondoggle, meaning a waste of money. But it was completed in 1825, and it worked really well. It drastically reduced shipping costs from the Great Lakes, the Midwest, to New York City. For example, the cost of shipping a ton of freight from Buffalo to New York City dropped by 90%. Barges on the Erie Canal were a lot cheaper to use than shipping by pack animals that had a cargo limit of 250 pounds. You might be wondering, well, why didn't they use railroads? Well, railroads didn't exist at that time, so the Erie Canal was basically the first way to express things from western New York to downstate, New York City. Railroads revolutionized shipping. The first railroad tracks were laid by the Baltimore and Ohio Railroad, the B&O. You might recognize that from Monopoly if you play Monopoly. In 1829. By 1860, the far reaches of the U.S. were connected to the eastern cities. By 1869, the Union Pacific Railroad completed the first transcontinental railroad, laying the last spike at Promontory Summit, Utah, which is 53 miles west of Ogden, Utah. So here we can see the Golden Spike. Here's a sign, about 10 miles of track laid in one day in 1868, and here's the great connecting thing where they drive the spike and everything. So in 1800, it cost between 30 and 70 cents to move a ton of wheat 1 mile by wagon. By 1860, that same shipment cost about 1.2 cents by railroad, so that drastically decreased the price. And also, if there was inflation between 1800 and 1860, it's even less. So that was a huge savings and very, very good. Did you find this video useful? If you did, please like it and subscribe to my channel. Neither action costs you anything and you'll be alerted about my new videos. Why? Well, it's simple. YouTube doesn't let me share any ad revenues unless I have 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hours of view time in a year. While people are watching these, I don't have 4,000 hours of watch time. I'm getting pretty close to 1,000 subscribers, but I'm not quite there yet. I need about 51 more at the time of this recording, so if you can become one of the 51 who'll help me out, that would be awesome. Ad money will help me make more videos. If you saw an ad during this video, please know I did not get any of the ad money, and I won't get any of the ad money until I have the subscribers and view time that YouTube demands before I can monetize these videos. For the same reasons, you are not only welcome, but encouraged to share links to this video, put it in playlists, etc. I will gladly read and respond to constructive criticism or suggestions for new videos.
I'd appreciate your input.
I reserve the right to delete comments such as troll posts or spam. And if you are in the Bay Area, you can hire me for tutoring. That is the Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area, not the Tampa Bay Area. So anyway, if you're in California in the Bay Area, you can hire me for tutoring in person. If you are anywhere else where you have internet, we can do it through the internet. And thanks for watching, and let's go to this next page where you can just get a little contact info. Contact me. You can contact me through Facebook at facebook.com/Linaball Tutoring. Instagram, instagram.com/John.Linaball.tutoring. Phone number 415-623-4251. John@JohnLinaball.com is my email, and you can find my website at www.JohnLinaballTutoring.com or JohnLinaball.com. Either one takes you to the same website. Testpreparation.locals.com. I'm also on lbry.tv at John Linaball Tutoring. And my mailing address is John Linaball Tutoring, 1859 Powell Street, number 109, San Francisco, California, 94133, if you want to send me some postal mail. Finally, note, this is not a substitute for your classes, text, etc. This video is based on Barron's AP United States History Review Book, 4th edition, and any other sources listed in the video description and my general knowledge of U.S. history. In this case, mostly things from Wikipedia and some of my other videos. While this should help you do well on the AP US History exam, I can't be responsible for what your teacher thinks is important and asks you about on the tests and the homework, etc. So please read your class texts and pay attention to what your teacher says in class if you want to do well in the class. All right, with that, I'm out of here. Hope you have a good day.